Do you keep losing friends, but you don't know why? If you were abused or neglected in childhood, I can almost guarantee you've had more than your share of ruined friendships. That's what complex PTSD does. At its heart, it's an injury to your ability to connect with other people for several reasons. It's super common for those of us who grew up with abuse and neglect to feel as adults that we are somehow not quite part of things. Do you have this? Where you feel like you're on the outside of groups, kind of in it, kind of not in it, but never really part of it. Or you start as a full participant, but then you pull away over time. You uninclude yourself. I've done this so many times. Now, maybe you're resigned to the fact that groups are just not for you, but belonging is important, and it's a real need that all people have. So you might be still trying, joining groups, getting uncomfortable, or feeling excluded, and then dropping out again. And maybe you think in each case that the problem is other people. And sometimes that could be true. But the telltale sign that this could be a personal choice, even when it doesn't feel like it, is that you're almost always at about the same distance from the center. And by that I mean every group has a center, a leader or two who are at the very middle, and then all around them are the people who put a lot of time and energy into the group. And a little further out are the people who are involved and influential, but not as much as the people near the center, and so on. Now, in my case, I used to always like to settle at about 80% out from the center, invited to the party, but not responsible for making the party happen. And a lot of times I'd start out motivated and thinking, you know what, this group is great. I finally found my people. I want to be involved with this. And then I'd move towards the very center of the group, maybe take on a more active role, maybe even a leadership role. And then sooner or later, probably sooner, I would find some reason to pull back. I might go to about 40% out of the circle first, but eventually I'd bounce out of the group altogether. So being part of something was, and in some areas of my life, it still is really uncomfortable for me. So why is that? I used to think my trouble with groups was just one episode of bad luck after another, the wrong coworkers, the wrong mom's group, the wrong 12-step friends. And I'd think, I guess I'm just really different. These people don't get me. And I never saw that it was a consistent pattern until I had a lot of healing from dysregulation and I started to have some clarity. And it makes sense because being in a group, when you have the sensitivities of childhood PTSD, can be too much. People are triggering, right? And groups of people, it's like a bunch of triggering people and the group dynamic that brings up all your pain about belonging and fitting in and all the times that that didn't happen. So dealing with a lot of people can be like an assault on your senses. And it gets really emotional. It's like a high school experience that just never stops. So childhood PTSD, it's not the same thing as introversion, but I suspect there are similarities in that being social with people can take more energy than it gives because you're just working so hard to act normal, to deal with it all, you know? But the thing is, when we need people, we need them on a practical level, and we need relationships if we're going to start healing the wounds of trauma, which are largely relational wounds. They affect your nervous system, but they were caused by what happened between you and other people, namely your parents. So the healing needs to happen before you have social relationships, but also it needs to happen within social relationships. The little interactions is where you get to practice what you're learning and where you get nourished emotionally, even though sometimes there's pain involved. There's criticism and rejection and genuinely being different in a group where everyone else seems to feel connected. But all that can get easier. So like everyone else, you need a sense of belonging. So it's natural that you'd gravitate to groups, but toward the outer edges at first. It's a little more manageable. You can be around people and be social a little bit, but just keep one foot out the door in case you need to get the heck out of there. It's okay to do that, by the way. Healthy groups have roles and space for many kinds of people, and it's okay not to participate fully for a while. Life would be great if you could keep going like this, just soaking up the group belonging feeling, not risking your emotions by getting too involved. But the problem is that relationships that are all on the periphery of groups make it really hard to develop meaning in your life. You need some friction. You need some contact with people to develop social skills. Everyone needs this. And staying on the periphery keeps contact shallow, so you don't get that. That's what we want at first, is to be out here. That's how we can keep from setting off old triggers. But shallow connections, they take a toll. The connectedness that you crave is more like a future fantasy. And in the present, you're still isolating. And then what starts as a kind of delay in your development can become a full-on deficiency. And next thing you know, you're getting more isolated than ever. That is how it happens. By playing it safe, you stay stuck. You need to be taking some risks to grow your comfort zone a little wider, a little wider. There are these normal ups and downs involved in having friends and being part of groups. If you're not continuously growing through experiencing the normal ups and downs of being in friendships and groups, you risk not only not being included anymore, but you can start to get hard to include. And what it is, and this will sound harsh, but avoiding people leads to self-centeredness. Not sharing yourself with other people, it's an emergency protection measure, but it's not a way to live your whole life. The possibility of sharing yourself is all around you. You can agree to bring something to a potluck dinner, you can join a choir or take a quilting class or invite friends out for a hike. When you show up for people in your life, you grow less fragile and more flexible and more connected and more included. And yes, it's demanding to be included. And isolation sounds so peaceful as an option. But if you allow isolation to take root, long term, it will take over. And your very worst traits will have this huge, fertile, empty space to take root. People in isolation grow crabbier, they get more self-centered, they get more bitter, they get more paranoid. And then it gets harder to turn the ship back towards connection again because you've gotten too eccentric, too awkward. I've called this turning weird on YouTube before. And some people have complained that I was being unfair, but I think it's fair. I know that isolation definitely made me a weirder version of myself. And I don't mean good weird. Have you ever felt this beginning to happen to you? Have you seen it in other people? I mean, I really noticed it in myself and other people, in fact, when lockdown was ending and I started being able to hang out with people again. I was rough on the edges. I talked too much. I wouldn't know what to say. I was a little angry, a little edgy, and gradually I kind of got my bearings again. So take your alone time and then keep chipping away at your capacity to stay connected. I know many of you watching this video are there right now wondering if any change is possible or worth it. And I just want to tell you, yes, it is possible, and yes, it is worth it. You just start with one small action. You just show up. So I teach a bunch of ways to do this in my Connection Bootcamp. That's a 30-day course that helps you keep taking positive actions each day, and you develop new skills for having relationships. You can explore that down in the description section. There's a link down there if you want to check that out. But for today, take a shower, put on your coat, go say hello to some people, go back to a group you used to like, pay a visit to a friend you've been neglecting, sign up for, a cleanup day at the beach or a blood drive or whatever community get-togethers are just happening. It doesn't have to be really exciting. It just gets you out of the house so that you can show up. And if you do one thing like this every other day, in a couple of weeks, you're going to find yourself included again. The need to be included is not just a weakness, it's primal. We're born into community, and as much as we want to escape it sometimes and be independent, we never can be, not totally, not really. And evolutionary biologists will tell you it's a survival strategy so that you have warmth and food and protection from predators and so on. But it's not just physical. Inclusion is just as important for the growth and development of your being, your intellect, your spirit. Because without inclusion in human relationships, the blossoming of your whole real self is arrested. It can't fully happen. fulfillment cannot come to you. So being included and connected is also crucial for your physical health, for your brain health. It wards off dementia. It creates a support system of people who care about you and who can come to your aid if you're broke or lonely or feeling like your life is falling apart. You're not meant to go through all that alone. You've probably done it before. I have. But let's just say right now that we should never have to go through life's hardships alone, ever again. Healing can bring that connection back to you. One-on-one relationships are one thing. If you have childhood PTSD, those can be just as hard as being part of a group. You need both. And I know it feels hard, and that's because it is hard. But keep trying. Keep participating. The reward for that is that you get to be included, and included is secretly really what we all want. That's where we want to be. One of the most misunderstood symptoms of childhood PTSD, and I see this in almost everyone who was abused and neglected, and I've seen it in myself, especially before I recovered, and it's that we seem to gravitate toward people who don't have their lives together. And we have the capacity to do this even when we do have our lives together, except for that one thing, that we're attracted to people who drag us down. The people with whom you associate is a huge factor in how you turn out in life. So why would anyone do this? I wanted to share with you a comment that came in last week from someone named John. And I just was like, John really nailed it on this, and I wanted to say more about it. So what he wrote was, breakthrough this morning. When you're a kid in a toxic family, they steer you away from making good connections with decent people. They don't want accountability. As a kid, you have magical thinking where you think your pain is visible. You want to be saved, but you're told that decent people are not to be associated with for fear their shitty parenting will be noticed, that your own parents' shitty parenting will be noticed. You carry this into adulthood by not making connection with assertive people of high morals. And then he said, I hope this message helps someone else. It helped me, John. Hey, I wanted to expand on this. This is one of the great mysteries for me, is like, why do we do that? I have a long history of, especially in romantic relationships, being drawn towards destructive types or, totally unavailable or self-destructive, either way, bringing my life down a lot. And people would just be like, why don't you just choose nice people? And the secret truth was, I'm not attracted to them. They seem dumb to me, or they seem two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional to me, and I don't relate. So I've thought it was that. I was told sometimes by therapists, you just want to recreate your childhood, or by new age people who are like, it's your karma. You're just going to keep recreating the pain from the past until you work it out. And so the people who hurt you are your teacher. And none of that ever sat right with me. None of it ever sat right. What John said sits right. I think that is what it is. My parents had serious problems with, especially around alcoholism and everything that goes with that. And they weren't very present. And the problems at home were quite visible to anybody who visited. And so when John wrote this, I was just thinking back. The first time I ever had a boyfriend, our first date was the 8th grade prom. And leading up to that prom, for the months preceding that, first there was all the anxiety with my friends. Will anybody ask us to go? I was 13, and when the prom happened, I had just turned 14. Would we get asked? And, what will we wear? So my family was really poor. What I would wear was a big worry. And I remember, so the prom was in May, I think, and in February that year, I was visiting my dad, and he died actually the next year. And so he was sick. He had Lou Gehrig's disease, but I was visiting him, and he was still able to walk and talk a little bit. And I told him about my worries about the prom dress, and he was like, I'm going to get you a prom dress. And my dad didn't have money either. He had, the problems that my parents had were just devastating to their lives. And even though he was very talented and educated and had once done well, he lived in a garage. And when we came to town to visit him, we couldn't stay with him and had to stay with relatives. But I loved him, and he loved me. And all of the problems that he had are one thing, but his love for me is definitely an asset that I have. He just loved me unconditionally, thought the world of me. So he took me to the mall, and I bought a prom dress that was a very beautiful, cool, tiered chiffon, zigzag pattern in maroon and light blue and dark blue. And it was kind of a disco dress, right? And I thought it was great. I loved how it looked, and it had these little spaghetti straps. And there's a picture of me sitting on the sofa at his girlfriend's house wearing this dress and looking very, very good and shy. And I was still a little bit innocent back then. I remember the dress was $45. And that was so much back then, especially for him. I think he lived on unemployment. And that was a lot of money back then. So it was this really special thing. And he also paid for me to buy these wedgie high heels. So since I was not quite 14, to have high heels, pantyhose, the disco dress, the whole thing. I think I had on some blue eyeshadow, this was like a really big deal for me. The Captain and Tennille hair. And when I got back to Arizona where I lived and where my friends were, they were like, nobody was going to wear stuff like that. They were going to wear these little Holly Hubby, Laura Ingalls dresses. I was a Laura Ingalls fanatic as a kid. And I didn't know these things were available. Well, that ended up being another $60 for a dress like that. And I had this little white ruffled thing, and it was very pretty. Had the shoes already, but I had to buy a second dress, and I babysat and got the money to buy this dress. It was such a big deal. Well, it was a week before the prom, and nobody had asked me. And I'm not totally sure why I would have been not asked by anybody, but I wasn't. I was, I don't know, okay enough, pretty enough, but I wasn't asked by anybody, and it was a week away, and I was desperate, and it was, at that time and place, it was all up to the guys to do the asking. In my English class, I had a little bit of talent for writing. In mid-semester, I was transferred into a journalism class that was really wonderful and exciting for me. A lot of people were good writers there, and it was stimulating, and I was writing a cartoon. And I put out like a weekly cartoon. It was called Dr. Lightning, Dr. Lightning. And I loved being funny. I was really into comedy. My big dream in life was to be a comedian, and I ended up being a comedian in the earlier part of my career. And now this is really, doesn't feel like comedy, but it comes in handy. Being the crappy childhood fairy. And I wrote this cartoon, and through that class, I met somebody else who loved comedy, who was clever like that, and liked my cartoon. And I wanted him to ask me to this 8th grade prom. So I did what 13-year-old girls do. And I guess by then I was just 14, and I had her go to him on my behalf and say, "Do you like Anna? Yes or no?" And I think she actually did it with a note with boxes and everything, and he could check the box. And he sent it back, yes. So she talked to him in person and said, "Will you ask her? She wants you to ask her." And he said he couldn't because he was really poor, and his mom, who was a single mom, couldn't afford to get him anything to wear. So I sent her back, my emissary, and said, "Go tell him that's fine. I don't care what he wears. I would just like him to ask me." So it was Friday, the week before the Friday that was the actual thing, and I was going to my locker, the bell rang, it was time to go home, and I was devastated, like it wasn't going to happen. She had already told him he had had several days to process this, and then he was walking ahead of me, and then all of a sudden he spun on his heel, and then he came back and he goes, "Do you want to go to that thing with me?" And I said, okay. And then it was like, oh my God. So I had now sunk all this money into the dress, and the horrible thing about having my first date was that his mother was going to drive him to my house, and he was going to have to come to the door, and possibly his mother, and we were going to have to ride in the car with his mother, but they were going to see where I lived and possibly come inside. And I became completely anxiously consumed with how I could possibly still have the date without letting them come to my house or see what's inside. And I had this great friend named Debbie, and we're still friends, and she came from a household that was somewhat similar. And she helped me strategize. How are we going to make it really fast? If they come in, have them come really fast, have them get out. But I was so scared, not of the date, but of getting found out about the conditions of my homes. So here's what my house was like when I was growing up. It was piled high with junk. There was rotten food all over the counter. You couldn't eat anything. there was little or no cleaning that ever happened, and things weren't put away. There was a giant hole knocked through the wall of the living room into the garage that at one point in the history of the family was going to be a doorway, but had never been finished. It was just raw bricks, and the smell of garbage and dirty walls. And what I was most afraid of is that my mother would make an appearance and she would show up really drunk. I was almost willing to give up my date to get out of this. So I worked it out. I waited by the door. I saw them pull up in the car. I ran out the door. I said, bye. And I just said, here, let me in. Let me get in the car. And I got in the car and nobody ever came in. Whew, I was able to hide my whole history, my whole life. Then we got there and there was this whole little march that you did, marching together. What was it called? The Grand March or something at the beginning into the cafeteria, where we had the dance. And there was the theme song that we danced to, which was Reasons by Earth, Wind, and Fire, which I had practiced with Debbie 100 times, how to slow dance, how are we going to do this? All of this was new to us. And my date said, I have a friend who's a grown-up who lives a couple blocks from here, and he has pot, weed. Do you want to go get high? And I was like, yeah, of course. And I didn't. I wanted to be at the dance. Gosh, I'd put so much into this for months. And that's what happened. We went to some guy's apartment and smoked pot. And I hadn't done that before. And it was weird and it was uncomfortable. And I was, luckily it didn't do very much to me. And then he gave us all beers and this other couple went with us. And it was just this devastating disappointment. Now, unfortunately, the story goes on that several months later, he did become my first boyfriend, and then he broke up with me, and it was just one of the most heartbreaking things in my life. I tried to hold on to that relationship despite all the crap and the crap fitting of the whole thing, of me being a girl who was so excited and into this and just settling for going to some guy with a mustache in some crappy apartment, who was, he had to be in his 20s. What were we even doing there? And that's where I got that aversion. That's where I got that aversion to decent guys. Thanks to Facebook, I know I'm friends with men and women who I went to school with, junior high, high school. And what's interesting is they're really cool. I like them. And I feel much more comfortable with a variety of people now that a lot of my trauma is healed, and that identity as the poor girl, the girl who's not wanted or asked anywhere, who doesn't, who takes the crappy jobs, who doesn't deserve to have what she wants, who suffers all the time and gets ulcers and smokes cigarettes trying to deal with the pain. That identity has melted away now, and I feel more comfortable with people. But here's the truth, John. I still feel most comfortable with people like you. I feel most comfortable with people who know what CPTSD is. People who understand the oddball suffering that we have that's not really like what anybody expects, who doesn't have what we have. People who have tender hearts when I describe what my past was like and who get it themselves. Because I understand you. It means the world to me that we have a tribe together where I belong. And I feel safe here, and I hope you can too. What I hear over and over again from the people who come and watch my videos is, wow, I just came to this channel and it's the first time anybody's described what it's like to be me. Me too. When I started putting videos out there, I didn't expect anything like this. But we are a tribe and we do understand each other. And some of us have gone on to great things and also struggle on the side with CPTSD symptoms, and we're all together working it out. You don't have to date people who are not good to you. You don't have to work for people who exploit you. You don't have to stay stuck in the outward signs of trauma if you can begin to change and heal that identity inside, that's all you are. That's what I think. We're seeking the people where we don't feel judged and we feel safe. And that can be really hard with people who are just have it all together. They just are put together every day. They move forward. They always have the right thing to say. Everybody likes them. that brings up a lot of pain for me, but that's where the daily practice comes in, is I'm resentful at the people who look so nice and have it all together. In my work life, I've met some amazing people, some people who have accomplished great things in business and spirituality and recovery and so many parts of life. When you're loved by people who relate to you, you have a lot more capacity to be friends with the people who don't relate to that part of you. And it's really good to be able to do that, because that's where, the world operates. It's full of all kinds of people, and it's a good way to be open-hearted and open-minded about them, but to know who you are. So what is it that makes those people who have it together feel uncomfortable for us? And here's what's become clear to me. It's shame. It's shame. I had shame about the house I grew up in. I continued to have shame about the ways that my life was dysfunctional, the ways that I could kind of keep it looking like everything's together on the outside, but if you got to know me or saw what was actually going on, you'd know that I was really dysfunctional in certain ways. And that shame made it simply unsafe for me to get to know people who would recognize that I was screwing up. I did not want to be seen for that. And that's why I have such tremendous respect for the people who write letters. Like, they're willing to be seen. There's a little anonymity there. But let me tell you, when they write letters and they write in and people get in there, never make shaming comments to people who write in. Only support those people. It benefits all of us to have a place where we can support each other, including the mistakes we make, including the things that should be obvious, but they're not obvious when you have PTSD. That's why we have each other. So we get shame because, yes, we get shamed for things that weren't our fault, stuff that, the condition of the house we grew up in or behavior of the parents who raised us, perhaps, things like that. But we also get ashamed of the stuff that we start to do. It's the stuff that we do. That is where that, what I call earned shame. There's shame that just glues onto you. And then there's this little bit of shame that's because you don't feel good about something that you did, right? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not telling you what you should feel ashamed about, but just that when I didn't treat myself with respect or when I hurt other people, I don't feel good about that. And so there's a feeling of shame so long as I'm holding it in and I'm not working it out. And when you don't have healing for your CPTSD, how are you going to work out shame? You need to be able to self-regulate. You need to have love no matter where you are on that journey of working it out, support, and you need to have people who get it. So I hope you find that here in this YouTube community. You can definitely find it in my Facebook community for members. Come be a member. There's always a link to that down below in the description section, and courses. But support from people who get it is essential to start breaking the cycle of shame. I'm the only one who's like this. I don't know why I'm such an idiot. That's what I used to think. When you begin to solve those life problems that make you ashamed, then your head comes up, and then there's room to start making different movements, different choices. I hate that word choices. It's so judgy, That's not a very good choice. You just kind of move about your life because we're all guessing, we're all improvising, I don't know, what should I do next? But it starts to get easier and wiser as you get freer of the fear and resentment that holds you down, that is the sort of chatter of complex PTSD. That's what the daily practice technique I teach is designed to bring down. So you have space for your better angels, for your smarter, wiser wisdom to come in and guide you towards a next step that makes good sense for you. And then the shame is healed. That's how it works. Less shame, more confidence, and you still get to have your deepest affinity with the people who get it about you. So I think that's pretty cool. You've probably been aware for a long time that connection is really hard for you sometimes. And this is a terrible way to go through life, robbed of the most important things that make life happy: love, belonging, people being there for you, having a tribe. And here's the thing, if the connection wound is there, it doesn't tend to get better by itself. It needs to be healed. And I'm calling you out that if friendships are not working out for you, now is the time to change that. It's so important for your life that you do this. And I'm not talking about the friendships where you made a trauma-driven choice to pursue friendship with someone who was cold or cruel or hurtful to you. I'm talking about the good friendships that may have been ruined by your past trauma and the way it made you see things and say things and do things that hurt the other person. And I'm going to teach you here what that looks like and how you can heal that connection wound so that you can be your real self and develop better friendships that last, that grow deeper over time. So let's look at a few of the most common trauma-driven behaviors that hurt friendships, right? Let's start with the first and most obvious one and the most destructive one, and that is lashing out. What's happening when you do that is negative emotions, which are normal, get oversized in your mind and they come bursting out without a filter. How many times have you expressed yourself and then within a minute or two had the strange feeling that maybe your anger came out too strong? It's the worst feeling. And part of this behavior is just learned. It could be what you witnessed growing up with parents who raged. But lashing out also has to do with how your brain and nervous system handle negative experiences, even little ones. When you feel criticized or judged or treated unfairly or left out, there can be this burst of brain activity. There are studies where they've used an MRI to see what goes on in the brain for people who had, what they called intensely stressful childhoods. Now, when something stressful happens, as adults, what you'll see on the image is on the right front cortex where emotions happen, boom, it's off the charts activity. And at the same time, there's this reduced activity in the left front cortex where reasoning is supposed to be happening. And that's pretty much what it feels like, right? People who don't have that trauma injury going on would have some activity on both sides. They're analyzing it some, they're feeling it some, they're thinking, well, this hurts, but let's put this in perspective. I should ask some questions and pause a little bit here to find out why this is happening and see if I can make it a little better. So that's healthy. That's a non-traumatized response. And I just want to remind you that what you can do, and this is what we're always learning here on this channel about how to heal your trauma response, is you learn to pause your response and what you say and do so that you can be intentional in that moment and maybe follow the pattern laid out by people who don't have trauma, where you think, maybe I can make this a little better. I will try to reason it out. I'll ask questions. So you can create your own guidelines for good ways of responding when something upsets you. You don't have to stuff your feelings, but you can choose your words and the timing of when you'll express yourself. And it feels really artificial at first, but there are so many reasons to practice this ability to pause and use conscious care when your triggers are active. With PTSD, you get hurt by something a friend says, and, it's like a 5-alarm fire over here. And you get a surge of emotion and your instinct is to fight it and to make it stop. It feels like all of the emotion is being caused by the other person and it's urgent to make it stop. But in reality, your reaction, which is getting this huge surge of intensity from your trauma wound, is exaggerating reality. So yes, people do and say hurtful things. And yes, sometimes we are in denial and we do the opposite mistake, but I'm talking about this one today. With CPTSD, sometimes when something is this big, your trauma makes it feel this big, okay? You're getting all the body signals, adrenaline, cortisol, a feeling of being gut punched and even panicked, and you're either going to go into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode. And when you lash out, that's what fight mode is. And we all know how this feels to be on the receiving end. It hurts. It feels unreasonable and crazy making, and you want to protect yourself, and you end up cutting that person off. And that may have been what other people have done to you. So when you react like this, you will get people pulling away from you. And in a moment, I'll teach you how to prevent that. Okay, sometimes it's not overt anger that you're expressing. It's, negative emotions. It's usually anger or feeling threatened, but it's dressed up as, concern. As in, I'm only saying this because I care about you, or I'm just speaking my truth. Do you do that? You say things that you think are just true or caring or clarifying statements, but your words are loaded. They're full of prickles. And it's because even though CPTSD stops you from seeing it in the moment, your words are loaded with hurt, and it's hurt directed at the other person. And what is it? It's the same criticism and judgment and feeling of injustice that sets off your triggers too. So before you even know what you're doing, your brain is like, you hurt me, I'll hurt you right back. And your CPTSD brain thinks it's protected you, but it's totally messing everything up. So don't confuse lashing out with setting boundaries. Good boundaries, well, first of all, they keep you out of situations that you are resentful to be in the first place. And that's often why we lash out. We didn't honor our own boundaries, and now we feel defenseless. Your boundary is not to fight about your boundary, but just to have it, to know what it is, to maybe say it, and to step away if it comes to that. And then instead of walking around exhausted and alienating people with conflict and drama, you're fresh, you're clear, you feel good about yourself and how you handle things, and you're ready for an actually good friendship. And doesn't that sound nice? Another way that negative emotions come in and wreck your friendships is you abandon people. This is the same thing where your CPTSD brain is trying to protect you by shutting people out, not speaking, not responding to them, giving them the cold shoulder, all because the reaction in here is more than you can handle, and it feels like they did it to you. And maybe partly they did, but CPTSD is characterized by that intense emotional reaction to things that is out of proportion to what's going on. And I know a bunch of you are going to say, but so-and-so is a narcissist and they were abusive to me and I can't let them get away with it. And no, you shouldn't. But I'm talking about friendships here. People you want in your life. So if you're feeling a little too much emptiness where friends should be in your life, this could be one of the reasons. But let's come back to drama, because that's a friendship ruiner all by itself. Sometimes your anger or defensiveness isn't directed at the friend in front of you. It's directed at someone else. And you're having a lot of drama about it. I'm messed up about this thing, and I'm telling you about it. And your CPTSD, if it isn't healed yet, it can be really hard to keep drama out of your life and just stay calm about life's ups and downs because, it just feels like trouble seems to find you. One way I've described it is having drama is like living in a house where there are no doors and windows, but for some reason all this cold air and wind and branches and mud are getting in. And there's, people, I don't know who they are. They're over here on the sofa. Everything's a mess. How did these people get in here? Why is it all messed up in here? It feels like it just happened. But it was you who had the doors and the windows closed. It's coming from within. So we all know what it feels like to be around somebody who's overwhelmed by their own drama. You can't help them, you can't reach them, and they're usually way too loaded up with their own stuff to care about other people. And there's, that's going to come with life when things get hard. The thing to remember is that drama is the natural byproduct when a person is out there living life. And that's a good thing. But thanks to being raised maybe in a dysfunctional family, maybe not having such good red flag detectors, drama sneaks in. So when you're going through drama, how are you going to not talk about it or have bad days? It happens, and this can be healed, but just for the record, some people who have left your life, even though you wanted them to stay, left because there was too much drama. And the people who will stick around when drama is running high are usually other traumatized people who are maybe attracted to drama or who have so much of their own that they're not even listening to you anyway. So either way, it's not a good dynamic. The next thing that ruins friendships, and here's a different kind of symptom that pushes friends away, and it's when you have too many rules for other people, which is a control thing about, what they can and can't say and do when they're around you. And this is another thing that happens when you don't have a good understanding of what a boundary is. Like, I don't hang out with people who are drinking alcohol. That's some people's boundary, for example. So that is a boundary because it's you knowing what you need and deciding who you will and will not hang out with. But if your boundary is confused or you don't have the power to communicate it well, or you're with someone who wants a drink more than they want your company, you may find yourself trying to control another person's drinking, arguing with them about it, trying to legislate the, he said, she said story of how you got there, getting triggered, which, who are we kidding, can happen to everyone with CPTSD under stress, it will often drag you into that argument, trying to control someone else rather than just having a boundary and respecting it, which means you either decide to accept the situation like, okay, fine, drink, I just changed my mind about you, or you just say, oh, thanks, I didn't realize we were going to a bar, I'm going to head home, talk to you later, bye. So you can decide later when you make that kind of exit, if that's the kind of friendship you want to keep trying to have. You can, you don't have to, but staying calm and collected in the moment without lashing out, without shaming the other person, just no drama, no attempts to control. Now what you have coming towards you is information and perception. You're like flowing water here. You're peaceful, you're flexible, you're powerful. And this leaves your choices about the future much more open. Now, you may not like everything about your friends, but there's often room to have your boundaries and let them be their wonderful selves. That's what they want. That's what everyone wants, to be themselves. So what can you do to contain your CPTSD symptoms while your healing is still in progress and still open up your life to better and better friendships? The first and best thing you can do is learn to calm your triggers from the inside out, rather than trying to make other people protect you from getting triggered or being hard on people when you do get triggered. Because it's not your fault that you have CPTSD, but it's not their fault either. The power to change things is actually right here, in your own brain and emotions and thinking. And that's where change is possible, even if it's not instant or easy. But you absolutely have the power in any moment, any interaction, to pause and soften down and listen and be attentive to what's going on so that your negative emotions, can go over here and your friends' feelings can be safe over here. And if there's something you need to communicate or express anger about or set a boundary around, it can usually wait a minute or two or even a day, because that little bit of time between trigger and reaction is your friend. It helps to keep your focus on the values and behaviors you're trying to hold for yourself or to grow into. Maybe it's kindness, right? Maybe it's a more accepting attitude. Maybe it's encouragement for other people. And that little moment of time will sometimes allow you to realize you're not into this friendship. You would like to step away. And no, you don't have to criticize them or judge them on your way out the door. They get to be them. You get to be you. And even if being you means not being in that friendship, that's okay. Now, having CPTSD can mean that on some days or for an hour here and there, you might get very stuck in your negative emotions and thinking. This is one big way that you might be pushing friends away. So there's a time and a place to talk to friends about how you're feeling, but there's a way that the intensity of CPTSD can make you talk a little too much about it. Good friends need your time and attention too. So force yourself, if you have to give them the floor sometimes. Everybody needs a safe way to express what's bothering them. And a good way to do that before you start venting on another person is to funnel those negative thoughts out of your mind and onto paper. Maybe you journal, but I use a technique that's much more specific and effective for me to get the lion's share of negative emotions resolved, not just recorded, but resolved, with just this little bit left that may be left that I need to express to someone. And that little bit is much more hearable for other people, because I've taken most of the fear and resentment that isn't really attached to them, but it feels like it. But I get it on paper. I ask for it to be removed. I rest in meditation. This is the daily practice technique you hear me talk about all the time. There's always a link to that down below, by the way, in the description section. I get most of that fear and resentment resolved. What's left that I need to talk to the person about, they can hear about it. When you have criticisms of other people, you actually don't need to speak all of them, and you don't have to run away. But you may need to express yourself. So ask yourself, when you have the urge to criticize, is this really necessary? Usually it's not. You don't have to say, I'm not going to your birthday dinner because I can't stand the way that you get stressed out before parties. You can just say, thanks, I'm so sorry I'm not able to come, but happy birthday. I hope you have a great time, right? When you've hurt someone, which is going to happen because, we're human, be quick to see it, admit it, do something about it. Don't wait, don't make excuses. Don't tell your friend all the reasons why you couldn't help but be hurtful because, whatever, your past, your problems. Just open your heart to them and own it and apologize. Good friends really appreciate it when you just say, hey, I'm sorry. What I said was really hurtful. I want to take it back. And that kind of honesty and humility is something we all admire in other people. And if you can do it, your friend is much more likely to open their heart again to you. Dear Anna, I have recently subscribed to your channel and have been watching one of your videos where you describe abandonment melange. I'm definitely experiencing this feeling right now after something which happened to me yesterday. Abandonment melange is a phenomenon named by Pete Walker that people who were abandoned as kids sometimes get, that feels like a very intense mix of rage, grief, and panic when your abandonment trigger gets set off. And it's more intense maybe than non-traumatized people, and you kind of know it. Maybe if you get it, you know what I'm talking about, and you've kind of known for a long time that you take it harder than other people when somebody leaves you, or even when you fear they're going to leave you. Actually, you can get abandonment melange just from thinking that you want to leave. So that's what this is about. All right, so Jean says, I know the feeling is probably too intense for what the situation warrants, but I feel lost and confused because every time I feel I've established a solid connection or friendship with someone, it seems to blow up and evaporate the moment I express having any struggles, problems, or needs of my own. I've got my fairy pencil here. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to. I'm going to read through Jean's letter so we can just hear what the story is here, and then I'll go back and talk about things I circled. All right, I've been happily married, she says, for the past 15 years. Before meeting my husband, all my romantic relationships were either short-lived or, quote, casual. I'm guilty of having been the cool girl in my friendships too, always having a tendency to put the needs of my friends before my own, then being punished or abandoned by these people when I dared to express any issues of my own. As a result, I tended not to suppress this side of myself and just basically crap-fitted, telling myself this was the price I had to pay to have friends and to be accepted in a social setting. Crap-fitting, that's a word that I made up for when we fit ourselves to crap. We get very good at it as kids to just, however unacceptably we're being treated or the situation's bad, we fit ourselves to it. You can lose a lot of years of your life crap fitting instead of having something that's happy for you. Okay. So Jean goes on. I grew up with parents who were emotionally immature and would often tell me that I was too much. Have you been told that? I really resonated with that, Jean. Instead of instilling discipline or setting boundaries appropriate to raising children, they would verbally lash out at me whenever I crossed the line. Fast forward to the present. Nearly a year ago, my husband developed a sudden, rapidly developing illness, and we decided to move cities to get better access to medical treatment. Shortly before this, I met a good-looking gay guy at my gym who seemed incredibly cool and funny, but also open to discussing his vulnerabilities. We hung out a couple of times and talked about a lot of things, and I felt like I had found that special connection. He expressed dismay that I was moving away. However, we kept in touch, mostly through messaging. The communication gradually dropped off as the months went on, but I just put this down to having separate and busy lives. Yesterday, this guy posted a meme on social media about dealing with personal struggles, and it resonated with me so much that I messaged him to tell him this. He replied that he's going through some heavy stuff at the moment and lamented the general lack of support from people around him. I told him I will be in town next week for work, and he replied that he would love to catch up with me, and then I did it. I sent 2 further messages briefly telling him about the struggles around my husband's illness, the treatment, and people's lack of understanding about the condition, kind of reflecting the sentiment that he had expressed. He stopped replying and left these messages unread. Following the advice of my late grandmother, I never write anything to anybody that I would not feel comfortable seeing printed in the newspaper. Hence, I'm confident I didn't write anything bad or crazy to this guy. Nonetheless, I feel embarrassed and downright crushed by the cessation of communication. Truthfully, I was so distraught yesterday I had to take medication. This kind of thing happens to me so much, and I cannot understand why. People who are all over me one moment ghost me in the moment I basically tell them my life is not perfect. I become highly triggered, especially when I express vulnerability to someone and it's not acknowledged. Recently, I opened up to my mother about overcoming my mental health struggles. She immediately responded by asking, had I heard from my sister? A further reaffirmation, says Jean, from my childhood, that I'm just not important enough to care about. Only after yesterday's episode did it hit me that this guy, who I had thought of as a friend, never once asked me about my husband's condition the whole time I've moved away, despite being aware of the situation. We chatted and messaged about other stuff, but it was always very lighthearted and harmless, like movies and music or his problems at work. Just realized he never asked me about my work either. I saw a therapist a couple years back who picked up on my hiding my own needs and problems so as not to appear off-putting to others. She made me realize that a healthy friendship entails a two-way exchange where both parties are allowed to have less than perfect lives. My question to you is, how do I go about cultivating healthy friendship dynamics where this kind of exchange is welcome and support is given as well as received? I'm scared that if anything happens to my husband, my life is going to be horrible if I keep attracting these types of friendship dynamics. Many thanks. All right, Jean, I think I can help you. So let's go through what you told me. So you get abandonment, Melange. You feel abandoned by this frequent, or I don't know how frequent it is, but it's happened again and again, where you have a friend and they just ghost you. And it always seems to happen when you express having any struggles, problems, or needs of your own. I know what you're talking about. I do know people where I've had that dynamic with, and it used to puzzle me too. You say, I've been happily married for the past 15 years. Before meeting my husband, relationships were short-lived or casual. So I don't know what it means that you had that kind of relationship, whether it was youth or another manifestation of this type of person who you end up being friends with. But you have a happy marriage now, so let's just call those past relationships water under the bridge. And you used to be the cool girl, and you do it with friends too. Cool girl is, she's like, hey, I'm cool, I don't need anything. And it's usually used in a context of a sexual relationship where the man doesn't want anything serious, just wants sex whenever he wants it. And cool girl is like, that's cool, but might be just dying inside, thinking she has to act cool. So we're not into being cool girl here. Tendency to put the needs of your friends before your own, and then you get, quote, you say punished or abandoned when you dare to express any issues of your own. So you keep having that experience. It's funny how whatever's in here will just keep being your experience out there, right? So your parents were emotionally immature. That's an interesting choice of words, and would often tell you that you were too much. Oh my gosh, I have been told I'm too much too, and I'm just the right amount. I just wasn't in the right place in my life yet. For me to stand here right now in my studio making a video, talking to nobody but a camera, you have to be kind of big. You have to have a lot of, going on here. And so this part of my personality, when I'm at the dinner table or meeting somebody new, I have to turn it way down because it's totally bowls people over. It's too much. So context, right? But we have a personality that we were born with, and all of our healing is about becoming our real selves, learning where our mistakes, our tendency to make mistakes, where that needs to be adjusted so that us being fully ourselves is also kind and considerate and reciprocal and all that good stuff. So you're on the way here. They wouldn't set boundaries or set discipline. They would just lash out. So this is interesting too. You kind of see that where you don't realize that you're crossing some line with friends. It's just, except you say something and then they're out. And you're confused about that. They just stop calling you. Somehow you were too much. So that's definitely the theme you're communicating to me. You're baffled. Why do I seem like too much? I was so careful to contain my personality. All right. So fast forward to the present. Your husband's having a serious health thing. Wow, that must be incredibly hard. Of course you need friends. And then you move to this other city to get the better medical treatment, and now you're alone. And you try to maintain a friendship by chatting with the gay guy at the gym, and he was funny and cool, and he talked about his vulnerabilities. Okay, so there are his virtues. He's funny, he's cool, he talks about his vulnerabilities. What he doesn't seem to be good at is caring about you even enough to ask how your husband is doing. I know such people. There are many of them. Not most people are like that, but it's self-centered. It's also emotionally immature. And some people, it's enough that they are fun friends that you hang out and do something fun and you don't talk about your problems. Like that can be a perfectly fine kind of relationship to have. But you're going to the hardware store for milk here. You're going to this person who really he says right out, I'm going through heavy stuff. I can't care about you right now. And then he doesn't call you if you say that you're having a heavy thing, and you are having a heavy thing. And somebody has to be mature, in a good place, and receptive to being supportive of somebody who's going through something like that, because it kind of outdoes whatever he's going through. I don't know, but yours is pretty big. And so maybe he's a narcissistic type where his problems always have to be the biggest, or maybe he's just going through heavy stuff right now and he can't deal with somebody whose partner is very sick and who's having crisis. You know, it's okay that he feels that way, but it's not the friend that you need and are looking for. That's all. So we can just, we can like take off any like villainizing of him or these other friends. They're not villains. They're just not the right one. And so you stayed in touch and you're blaming yourself. You're like, and then I did it. I sent 2 text messages telling him about struggles around your husband's illness. Because, and I'm going to say this is probably your CPTSD, if you didn't have the trauma when you were a kid and you had been totally emotionally raised by good, sane parents, you would be able to read the room. And, you'd be able to tell, like, you would have noticed a long time ago that he sort of fades out when you talk about yourself. He doesn't want to talk about you. He wants to talk about him. He's happy to have you around. If you talk about him, he doesn't want to carry any water for you. That's all. I don't think it's great, but I do like to emphasize that blaming other people is not really productive. So, all the focus is like, okay, what can you do? What have you done? What can you do? Because that's where your power to change the situation is. So you told him about what you're going through, and it was very similar to what he had said. And then he just stopped even accepting your messages. I believe you. You didn't say anything bad or crazy. Some relationships are the kind where you can talk about this stuff. I've talked in some of my earlier videos. I had a period between 2004 and 2008 when I was in and out of the hospital for 14 surgeries. I was a single mom. The whole situation was throwing my life into chaos, financially, emotionally, socially. And it was shocking how few of my friends would actually show up and help me. There were a few people who came to the hospital once, but mind you, I was there 14 times for probably a cumulative 4 months or something. So, a few one-time visits were not enough. And I had whole weeks without visitors. And I was surprised because I used to give a lot more energy than that to other people. And some of the ones, like I was a 12-step sponsor, and, yeah, it's a lot of time that you share with another person. It's not a commodity exchange. You're not giving time in demand for something back. But I was just disappointed. I was like sponsoring 12 people and only a few of them ever showed up to, help me out. I needed housework. I needed my kids driven around. I needed food. Sometimes I was doing better, but when I was first out of the hospital or needed a ride home, I just was like a pile of needs, and I had such a hard time asking for it because I guess I knew on some level that they were going to let me down. And then a few people show up, and not only do they not let you down, but they amaze you. And so I think sometimes when we're suffering and like what you're going through and what I'm going through, one silver lining is that it forces you to have to reach out for help. And if you're like me, like you don't do that very much. And so you don't have the fruit of finding the people who are actually there for you. And so it's never enough though. I have this documented in some of my other videos and courses, but there were times when I just didn't have anybody and I was in such grief about it. I couldn't get better from all this surgery. It kept falling apart because I couldn't rest and I was lifting my little kids and I was so sad and I was like, why is my life so hard and other people aren't? And a mentor said to me, because you don't have a mom, you don't have a sister, you don't have a best friend, and you don't have a partner. And I was like, there's the math, right? So your husband's in need right now. You don't have enough support for dealing with that. So that's an important problem for you to tend to, but you need the right people. You need the right people, and sometimes it takes time to cultivate those relationships. But it can feel less like despair when you're on the path, when you're working on cultivating those relationships. And by writing this letter and sort of inviting some insight about it, you are taking a huge step toward opening your mind and your healing process. So you're good. Things are going to happen. Things are going to happen because you've done that. So you said I get highly triggered when I express vulnerability to someone and it's not acknowledged. So one thing about that, just to see, can we scan the horizon for anything you might be doing to make it worse? When we have a trigger, it's understandable that you have a trigger about that, but it could be kind of uncomfortable for people. Your energy gets weird. There's anger where it's kind of puzzling to people. So that might be something, is that when you express vulnerability or say something, you might already have a little bit of tone that's kind of putting people on notice, just possibly. I'm not accusing you, just like ask yourself, is that it? And you might not be able to stop doing that right now because you still have a trigger, but that's what my program is all about. You learn to calm these triggers, and then they come out just neutral, and they don't have that charge that feels like an accusation. Because two people, they have a nervous system, you have a nervous system, and no matter how much you're acting like the cool girl and being like, no, it's fine that I pay attention to all your problems and needs and you run away, no, it's cool, right? If you do that, but your energy can't lie, they can feel you. They can feel you, and they can feel that you're angry and that you need something from them. And sometimes, being that you didn't get your needs met as a kid, that need can be a little outsized. So again, I don't know if that's true for you, but it's something to ask yourself. It's a way that people with CPTSD can kind of be part of this dance of getting treated this way, okay? Recently, you opened up to your mother about overcoming your mental health struggles. Okay, I understand the impulse, but I just want to say, you get what you pay for, right? If your mom is the person who treated you that way, chances are high she cannot hear this. And that's just been a lot of our experience. She can't hear it. But you tried. It's worth a try. It's worth a try, but if I had been there at your side while you did that, I would have said, prepare yourself. It's probably not going to go well. And if it doesn't, just don't even worry. All you're doing is running an experiment. Like, is today a day when she can maybe hear it? No, still no. Okay, cool. You don't have to be cool, girl, but you just have to be realistic sometimes. Like, mothers are supposed to care, but she can't. And it's sad. But she can't. So again, it's going to the hardware store for milk. But this was interesting what you said. When you said, hey, I overcame my mental health struggles, she immediately started asking if you had heard from your sister. She dodged that one. Hearing about your mental health, that you ever had mental health struggles, probably reminds her, at least on an unconscious level, that she didn't treat you well as a kid. And it's not surprising that you would have struggles. Oh, hey, change the subject. How's your sister? So that doesn't surprise me, but I know what it's like. And it's just like such a colossal and obvious dodge of you opening your heart. And I'm sorry, That does feel bad, but it's time to adjust your expectations. You have such a mother. And so here's what's interesting. You said she did that, and you put in boldface, a further reaffirmation from my childhood that I am just not important enough to care about. All right, I'm going to stop you right there. No, that's not what it is. I think you're telling me what your fear is. Fear, it just goes to show I'm not important. And I hear that that's how your emotional being hears it. But no, it's a reaffirmation that she is emotionally damaged and not able to pay attention to another person's needs, and needed to change the subject, either on purpose or unconsciously, or basically is just so freaking out of it that she doesn't even know that you're not supposed to do that, that's rude. Yeah, you have a mother who's incompetent at hearing sensitive things and responding appropriately. In the end, that's what it is. So it reaffirms nothing about you. It says nothing about you. There's nothing wrong with you for having this wound from how you were treated. That's to be expected. It's normal. And you're actually, you're working on it. So you're fine. There's no reaffirmation that you're not important enough to care about. You're totally important, and you need to be cared about. You have a husband now, so that's somebody who cares about you. Your mom probably is never going to care for you more than she does right now. And it'll be superficial. She can't hear you. I don't know anything about her, but I just know she couldn't respond to you in that moment. And it was really, sounds like it's never really better than that. So a therapist validated for you. Yeah, This is you hide your own needs and problems to not be off-putting. So you really seem to have internalized this idea that you're too much. And if you did, you're so much like me and so many women that I'm close to, where we're just like, yes, we're too much. And what is too much? We're very vibrant emotionally, often intellectually. We have a lot to say. Like, I'm not always received well when I have opinions or when I have a lot of exuberance or enthusiasm. It feels like a lot to people. I'm at a point where my emotional needs are basically met by me, and I have a husband, and I have sons who are caring. I'm reasonably cared for enough that anybody else, if they're uncaring towards me, it doesn't destroy me. I think it's rude. I might not like them. It hurts my feelings, but it doesn't destroy me anymore. I have a defense there. And I know a lot of people are listening and they just don't have that person who gives them a little buffer, who cares about them even when other people don't. And so all of us, that's our job, is to learn to connect enough to have people who do care. And should we need help, they will be there for us. And part of how we do that is by being there for them. And it's a tricky dance, isn't it? Because you don't want to be a doormat. You've been sitting there listening to like this gym guy's problems all this time. So here's another thing just to ask yourself. I don't know that this is what you did, but this is one thing that a person sometimes does, which is when you tend to take care of other people's needs and they don't reciprocate, it can be this kind of negative, toxic pattern of trying to do a trade with them that they never consented to. You're just like, hey, I'm cool, girl. I'm your friend. We're just friends. Oh, that's so sad that you have that problem. And then you demonstrate all this empathy for them. But on some level, you're trying to make a trade with them. Like, I'll tell you what, I'll go over the top and care for you. Will you do it for me? But it's not spoken. And you only hung out with them a couple times. So, it's like, this is a little bit like dating. Like 2 dates, you don't really get to have big expectations of somebody. All that is a way to get to know somebody. And some people do like open up intimacy, friendship, closeness with others by talking about their problems, right? So this guy did that. But that was, it just wasn't what you hoped. So I would say women, friends, people who have some similarity to you, like it's okay to have a male friend, and a gay male friend is safe for your marriage and everything. But women, it's really important to be friends with women, especially when you had a crap mom. And I speak from experience. I had a long time when it was hard for me to do that. And it's so much better now. And there's an important thing that, people who are similar, they can give each other, they can have that understanding together. So that said, everybody's got to find friendship where they can. Everybody's a little unique. Not everybody fits the mold. I used to think it was, I'm just not like woman-like, and I fit in better with guys. But I think a lot of that was CPTSD. It was CPTSD making it very triggering for me to be around women, and especially the way they have ease around each other. It's hard. Then I'm like, why do they have ease? I don't know what to say. I don't know the right thing to say. And the less fear and resentment I have, I use this technique, the daily practice. I teach it in a free course. It's always down below in the description section. It's on my website, Crappy Childhood Fairy, free course. You take that free course and I will send an email to you inviting you with a welcome. You get a welcome email and it says, do you want to join me in my free calls? And I do the calls twice a month. And people come on live and ask me questions. We use the techniques and then I take questions. But using that technique, the reason I devote so much time to sharing that with the world is because it saved my life. And it helped me just move a lot of just fearful, resentful thoughts. I don't know where they go. I don't know how they connect. I don't know what causes what. I don't have to know. I just have to get them on paper and out, ask for them to be removed, rest in meditation. And I just find that my mind has room for new things, new development, new feelings, new relationships. I'm not so in the grip of things that have hurt me in the past. And you know how they do that? They just sort of like ride on top of your head, and squish you down. And it's all you can, it attracts your focus. And every time your feelings get hurt, you're like, see, that thing. And I hear that going on for you. It's normal. But the more you get free of that, the more you can begin to have a new experience. And isn't that what we all want? We want newness. We want the opportunity to have a life defined by who we really are and not by what they did to us. So what do we do about this? So how can you change the pattern? Jean, this is what I want to suggest to you. Think of these friendships a little like dating, where you're not going to just rush in and be best friends and tell each other your problems. Your problems are not the main thing about you, even though right now it is kind of the main thing about you that you're going through this crisis with your husband. But you are a whole person with a whole life and a whole story and a whole set of ears and a whole heart to share. And so gradually, I'm going to say like 6 times hang out with somebody before you get into problems of your own, right? Just 6 times to hang out. Hang out, have light conversations, ask questions, tell things about yourself, but not the heavy stuff yet, all right? That's the secret, is just to allow a friendship to sort of take root, get a feel for it. Sometimes you hang out 3 times and you just realize, we don't have anything in common. Or you hang out for a few times and you're just like, I don't like this person. I don't like what they just did, how they treated the waiter or whatever it was. And so you're going just a little at a time. Think of it like an egg carton, put 1 egg in at a time, 1 egg in at a time. You don't just take the whole thing and go. So just gradually test the relationship and see. And you can begin to introduce things that are on your mind, not crises yet, but just kind of be very conscious and just see how they respond to that. And don't go in and caretake them emotionally around the problems they say. You can nod. Honestly, when I talk about my problems, I find it very hard when people get in there and try to fix it for me and go, oh my God, that's so hard. Because what you're saying is, and they try to reframe it, and I know they're just being kind, but I don't like having my stuff reframed. Mostly I like, if I tell a friend I'm having a hard time with this, I cut my teeth emotionally in Al-Anon. Years, and there's a custom there that you just let people say what they're saying. You don't comment on it. You don't go pat them on the back or anything. You just let people say what they're saying, even when they're sad. After the meeting, you can go up and go, oh, I heard what you said, and that sounds really hard, and here's my number. You can do that, but you don't do it in the middle of people talking. And at first it felt very weird to me, but you actually can just let people talk and give them your full attention and show them with your face that you care. You don't have to rush in and fix it. And definitely you want to stay away from trying to create any sort of tit for tat. Like, I tell you what, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of empathy, but you owe me. Really just get to know somebody and see what they're like, and see if they really are somebody that you want to share things with, or that you want to give a whole bunch of emotional energy to. Now, because you have this kind of trauma imprint where, and I think you had said, that you attract this kind of person. Did you say that? I don't know. You may not have, but that's often our perception. We just go, I don't know where these people find me, but they do. They're actually, there's a whole mix of people around you, just like everybody. It's not magic. It's who you resonate with. You're used to it from your mom. You have the capacity to pay attention to people who are self-centered. And they love that, believe me, because they're so self-centered, they can't get everybody to do that. So when they find somebody like you, they're not being devious. They're not intentionally hurting you, but they're just they love to have people dote on their problems, and they're not interested in giving it back. That's how they roll. You will crap fit to that. So there you are. Now you have a friendship with a person like that. Somebody who didn't have your trauma would probably just be like, oh, hi, gym guy, and then not have a friendship, because they would sense the shallowness of somebody who talks about themselves but shows no curiosity and does not even respond when you say, well, I'm moving away because my husband has a serious medical thing. Any friend who is emotionally intact is going to go, oh my gosh, what's going on? Is he going to be okay? Where are you going to live? Any friends would do that. The guy at the gym, you'd only hung out a couple times. So it's not even really on him to be that. He hasn't let you down. He's just revealing who he is and what he's interested in right now. And it's not what you hoped. So he's off the hook. You're off the hook. And now you get to practice through getting to know people in your new city by, one little hangout at a time, one conversation at a time. Hold back on the heavy stories. If they're throwing heavy stories out there at you, you can say things affirmative like, oh yeah, that must be hard. I have experienced stuff like that. But don't go into it yet. You're gonna be measured in your approach to sharing yourself and see what happens. Often by the time you've hung out 6 times, you're gonna have a feel for this kind of thing. You'll have a feel for whether they are a reciprocal person. You can absolutely shift your pattern and change this, but it's just time to bring your awareness into it and just keep paying attention to the interactions. And for this, it helps if the first ones are not super long, like not a big day outing or something, a cup of coffee, a little walk, a short thing so that you have a conversation. And it's okay that some friends are not for our deep stuff. They're just people we take walks with. That's okay. You can do that. I think you're going to do well, though. I think you're going to recover because where your attention is right now is right where it needs to be to start opening your mind. I like what you're doing. Everybody does things sometimes that they know create problems and that get in the way of the good things they're trying to do in their lives. And I call these self-defeating behaviors. Things like losing your temper at work, or flaking out on people who count on you, or overeating, or staying in a bad relationship that's grinding you down. They're just a few examples of self-defeating behaviors. Now, if you never did these things, your life would be better, but the reason you do them anyway is usually because of an emotion. I talk about this in my Healing Childhood PTSD course, how there's a trigger, an outside event, that sets off a very strong emotion, and the emotion unleashes the behavior that you don't want to do. So trigger, emotion, self-defeating behavior. Now, triggers are going to happen. A lot of people try to make triggers go away, but the triggers are caused by, the world. It's other people. It could be a loud noise. It could be that someone criticized you or rejected you or ignored you. It could be that you felt embarrassed about something. Anything could be a trigger, but the trouble is, you can't really control whether triggers happen. They happen. They're outside of you. If you only focus on triggers at the beginning of the sequence that leads to your own self-defeating behaviors down the line, you're just running around spending all your time trying to make other people comply with what you want. So, that's where you get people who are like, don't talk about that around me. Don't ever be late with me. You can't really control other people like this. You can ask. We talk about this. You can ask people, but you can't really make the world stop triggering you. If you have triggers, it's going to happen. If you try to control people, they'll push you away and then your triggers get worse, right? So it's not a good way to control your own behaviors, is trying to control other people and whether they trigger you. Instead, you'll have a much better time focusing on your emotional response to triggers. If you recognize when you're going into one of the emotions that I call the big three, the ones that put you on a slippery slope towards self-defeating behaviors, then you buy yourself some time to actually prevent the behavior that tends to follow. Or you can minimize it at least. Maybe it's smaller. Maybe it's less often. So you focus on the big three emotions. All right, so what are the big three? They are feeling overwhelmed, feeling lonely, and feeling fearful. Now, everyone feels these feelings sometimes, but if you've done something you regret, chances are you were feeling overwhelmed, lonely, or fearful. Now, you're probably wondering about anger. And yes, it's definitely there, but I see it as a secondary emotion that rides in on the other core emotions of feeling overwhelmed or alone or scared. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So strong negative emotions are initiated by a trigger, and they result in a behavior. Something happens, the feeling floods you, and you feel, maybe numb, like you flew out of your body, or you feel a big rush of adrenaline and your heart's pounding, or you get hit with a sudden rush of emotion. And this can be scary because on some level you're about to self-sabotage. But it's really hard to do anything about it at that point because the strength of the emotion and the need to express it just feel like too big to stop. Have you ever had that happen? There's a trigger and a huge negative emotion wells up, and then you say or do something that hurts your relationships. This is a terrible cycle, very simple really, that allows past trauma to turn into ongoing struggles in your life. Trigger, emotion, behavior, trigger, emotion, behavior. Let's go back to those three troublesome emotions: feeling overwhelmed, feeling alone, and feeling fearful, all right? So everybody has them. In non-traumatized people, the feelings go up and then they gradually come back down. So the feelings can be processed, and if there's some action that needs to be taken, they can take time to figure out what that's going to be. They calm down, then they can take sensible action. All right. But with childhood PTSD, these feelings of fear and loneliness and overwhelm can just go through the roof and they keep rising. Have you had that happen? And this is part of what's called emotional dysregulation. If you have this, it's not your fault. But the problems it causes are now yours to deal with. So emotional dysregulation can be like drowning, like having the air sucked out of you. And it can lead to those secondary emotional reactions like rage and panic. And it can be hard to bring the emotions back to an acceptable size, a size that doesn't terrify people around you and cause you to get fired, right? That extra strong factor in your emotions is because your nervous system is having a stress response. And with CPTSD, you might call it like a overreactive stress response, a dysregulated response to stress. So if you take a brain scan of someone who's calm and mentally regulated, you'll see lines flowing together in, kind of a parallel fashion from different parts of the brain. But when you're triggered and your brain becomes dysregulated, those lines, they start going in a zaggy pattern. And similarly, the variability of your heart rate, which goes like this, it goes out of sync with your breathing, which normally rises and falls with your heart rate. But they go out of sync. And that's what it feels like when you're panicky, getting discombobulated. You overreact to something stressful and can't seem to get a grip on the reaction. Your mind is all over the place. Your emotions go higher and higher till they feel unbearable. And this is when very bad things can happen. Because you might feel this sense that things are dire. That's what your nervous system is telling you. Well, now, it has to happen now. It's urgent. You have to yell. You have to feel like you're doing something about the problem or else you're going to explode. Or you have to beg the person who's leaving you, please don't leave, because it feels like you will die. Trauma is coloring your perception here, isn't it? When you're feeling this overwhelmed and this terrified or this alone, your negative impulses kick in to temporarily feel like a fix. So there are 3 negative impulses that set off self-defeating behavior, and they connect roughly to the negative emotions that we just talked about that get triggered in childhood PTSD. So overwhelm will tend to go into the urge to escape. And aloneness becomes an impulse to cling, to hold on. And fearfulness becomes an impulse to control. So escape, cling, control. And if you're like most people, you probably have one of these. That's your dominant impulse when you're under stress, but most of us have all 3 in some measure: escape, cling, control. And this is tough because the behaviors that get triggered by these impulses are where 80% of the damage from childhood PTSD take place. It's not all from what happened to us in the past. It's not from the triggers or the feeling we're experiencing per se, but it's from our behavior right now in response to that and the impulses that drive us into that behavior. And this is not easy to face. I know that. It feels safer sometimes to focus on what happened, what other people did, how sick they were. And compared to facing our own self-defeating behaviors, talking about other people and the past and feelings, that's kind of like a comfort zone. It's out here. But your own actions is where it totally matters now. What will you do to either hurt your life or change your life for the better? And a lot of people with childhood PTSD instinctively know this is the big question, but we lack insight about, what exactly is the problem? And for you to develop good discernment about that, what's the problem, what needs to happen to change it, you will need a safe way to look at what even is a self-defeating behavior, okay? So no pressure to change anything right this second as you watch this video, but I'm going to share with you my list of common self-defeating behaviors. There are, plenty. You don't have to take notes on this. I will give you a link at the end of this video for a PDF that you can download and use at your own pace and take notes on, and see how you're doing with your self-defeating behaviors. So here are some common self-defeating behaviors for people with childhood PTSD. Number 1 is black and white thinking. Traumatized people are often attracted to extreme views and groups and authority figures. Now, maybe you are outraged about current events, and I'm sure you have your reasons, but if it's consuming you, it could be a self-defeating behavior. You might be arguing with people about your opinions, and it gets too heated, and it's damaging relationships, it's damaging your reputation. Or you might find yourself tangled up with mentors or friends who dominate you. There's that extreme, like out of proportion power dynamic. Maybe you're the dominant person. Maybe you're putting people into hard categories of these people good, those people bad, and you're cutting off contact with people outside the people you consider good. Those would be examples of black and white thinking. Number 2 is neglect of your body. Now, money could be why you have just one pair of beat up sneakers. I've had just one pair of sneakers before, one coat, one pair of sneakers, rainy season, always wet, big holes in them. I didn't have a lot of money at that time. That was money. But you might have also not been taking care of yourself. That's another reason why you might be kind of disheveled in tatters. Maybe you haven't been to the dentist in years. For a lot of people with childhood PTSD, it's a little more than just being poor. You're suppressed or diminished in the clothes you wear. You're suppressed or diminished in your ability to do just basic hygiene or to exercise. Something traumatized people do is avoid doctors and preventive care sometimes. Things have to get really bad before you deal with it. And sometimes for some people, it's too late at that point. All right. Number 3 self-defeating behavior is addictive use of food. And this includes everything from carrying a lot of extra weight to eating disorders to, having a love affair with sweets and high carbohydrate foods that make you feel exhausted because you ate them. These foods can feel really calming for a moment when you're dysregulated, but in the long run, they make you more dysregulated. So if it gets to the point that it's making you sick or brain fogged or exhausted, it's a self-defeating behavior. Okay. Number 4 is the addictive use of media and entertainment. It seems like almost everyone has this problem now, watching too much TV or browsing the internet or playing games so much that you're not getting enough sleep, or you're losing your daily routine or your job or face-to-face connection with people, or it's eating up your funds. That is a self-defeating behavior. Number 5 is dishonesty. And this includes things like exaggerating, hiding important personal truths or preferences, lying, stealing, cheating on your significant other, tax evasion, any kind of illegal activity. All right. Number 6 is work problems. And in that category, I would put staying stuck in a job you hate, not working when you could work and should work, overworking, or having more than your share of conflicts with employers and coworkers, things like suing or getting sued or acting in a way that makes coworkers feel scared of you or humiliated. All right, that's not uncommon with childhood PTSD. Number 7 self-defeating behavior, blame. And this includes having a hard time seeing your own role in problems. It's victim thinking, it's bitterness, it's casually saying things about other people that hurt their reputation, which is slander. It's also called calumny. That's when you say things with the express purpose of harming someone's reputation. It's very wrong. Believing that all your problems are because of, racism or because of sexism or foreigners or one or another political party or economic system. A lot of people who think they are above all of this and have the answers are having a trauma reaction. That's, they're like literally thinking they're above others, up and above. And they're quick to call out other people's shortcomings and declare the solution. We have to do more to make people change the way I think they should be, that kind of thing, when they often have glaring problems of their own. All right, number 8 is numbing with substances like alcohol or drugs. How much is too much? You are going to have to be the judge of that. But if it's interfering with your energy level, your focus, your relationships, your finances, it's probably too much. Okay. Number 9 is irritability. Maybe you get angry sometimes for no reason, or you get into arguments more than your share. You get road rage. You yell at the TV. I have a relative who once shot a gun at the TV, ruined the TV by shooting it. It was so mad about something. You might see comments online that are so hostile. It's just, it's raging. Or customer service calls. Do you ever get triggered by those where you're getting the runaround or you're even losing your temper at people face to face. In the extreme, this can include like a total rage attack that's like, life-threatening. It can lead to violence. Number 10 is an attraction to troubled partners and friends. People who were abused or neglected as children are often attracted to people. They feel more comfortable with people who were themselves traumatized, including people who have high levels of drama and addictions and conflict and serious legal and financial problems. All right, it's a self-defeating behavior to glom onto that. Number 11, unfulfilling romantic life. Now, maybe you avoid dating anyone at all, even though you haven't made a decision to end that part of your life, or you stay in bad relationships where there's no trust or no love. You may be telling yourself you do this to avoid getting hurt, but it borders into a form of romantic anorexia. Have you heard of that? Social, sexual, emotional, romantic anorexia, an avoidance of those things. That brings me to number 12, which is the abuse of your sexuality. And this can include an overly sexualized appearance or being inappropriately seductive. As a result of your upbringing, you may even have a distorted sense of the messages that you're sending with your behavior and poorly developed boundaries. That is so common. Maybe you have affairs that would badly hurt other people if they knew, or you generally feel humiliated by how you're treated, and you keep seeking out that person anyway, as if you can set it right somehow, if you could make contact or get them to hear you, or you feel ashamed of your own behavior and you can't stop it. That's a self-defeating behavior. Number 13 is fantasy. And I know, that fantasy is considered like a positive thing, but it can also be a self-defeating behavior. And that includes romantic obsession, including limerence. That's obsessing on someone who can't be with you or, who's rejected you or maybe isn't even in your life. But it's gotten to the point that you're not living your life or connecting with people because you're very attached to this idea of somebody else, maybe searching online, for possible signs that they feel the same way about you. Fantasy can also be about money and career success, where the fantasy is so consuming that it takes the place of any actual work or action steps that would help you get where you want to be. And in the extreme, it can go so far as stalking or delusional thinking. Number 14 is avoidance. And this symptom is so common among people who were traumatized as kids. It can be overt when a person avoids connecting with people, or accepting responsibility or participating in groups. But it can also take the form of covert avoidance. I made that word up, and it's for when a person appears to be, that you might be married, you might go to a job and hang out with everybody, you go to parties, but you never really connect with people. And there's like a big gap in terms of accountability and commitment to them. So that's covert avoidance. And then this is kind of where avoidance takes the form of social, sexual, and emotional anorexia. All right, debting. While financial hardship can fall on anyone and can and has, and financial stability isn't always guaranteed, debt can become a self-defeating behavior when you're living beyond your means to pay for a place to live and transportation and clothes and recreation. Trauma can interfere with your ability to consistently earn a living or to accurately gauge, like, how big a threat is it if I spend down the available money I have this month? Like literally there are brain changes for people who are traumatized that make it hard to assess the risk that brings on. So you get this gambling-like behavior. And in some of its worst forms, debting can turn into a gambling addiction or an unsustainable get-rich-quick mentality, and it can lead to foreclosure and bankruptcy and ultimately homelessness. Number 16 is a habit of repeating traumatic patterns, and clinicians call this repetition compulsion, where you find yourself in a relationship with a partner or some friends who have similar dysfunctional behaviors to your parents. Now, I don't believe this is done intentionally. I don't think you're trying to recreate your childhood, but people with CPTSD can develop a blind spot around red flags and others that, when I've done it, I've sort of experienced it as sort of like going blank and then marching right into the problem. It's not like a decision to have that problem. It's not conscious. And you cannot deny that we so often end up with people with problems that match the problems of our parents. So even when the signs are there, that someone you've allowed into your life is creating trouble, you may have a hard time setting up a boundary. And you'll experience this as a feeling of disappointment and surprise that, oh my gosh, once again, you're with someone who's sick and unavailable or dangerous or what have you, whatever your pattern is. And it can make you vulnerable to emotional hurt and physical and financial and social harm, right? You don't want troubled people in your life like that. You're trying to go somewhere good. So people who hurt you, you can consider them always a setback to your healing. Okay, so these are the main self-defeating behaviors. If you're ready to change, it helps to get acquainted with the list, identify maybe one problem you'd like to work on. Don't try to do a million things at once. Maybe don't even try to do 2 things at once, just one. And then find support to take positive actions toward changing it. One way you can do that is to learn to calm your triggered emotional reactions that push you toward the behavior you're changing. To do that, try this. Try my free daily practice course. I talk about it all the time. I know the link is always in the description section below my videos and on my website too. And if you register for the courses, you'll get an email from me inviting you to live Zoom calls where we use the techniques together and I answer your questions. So maybe you'll try it and I will see you on a call very soon.